Hey everybody, it's Jason Bloha here, and now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community, and let's dig a little deeper into the Nick's G for P video I did yesterday. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on scaling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. You know, the one I did yesterday, I had some fun with it, but I probably should discuss this as a serious topic also because it is a big piece of news. Yesterday it was obvious. A lot of people, they're not used to my antics, that I do try to have some fun in that segment. That is my segment where I get to troll, have fun, tell jokes, and just kind of do my own thing, right? And a lot of it's intended as fun and humor. Obviously, let's be realistic here, guys. Anyone who saw anything about Nick being sued by Phil Heath, we know what it was really about. We know what it was really about. I jumped over and kind of took a side thing that some people were joking it was about and just kind of did a joke with it. Partially because I do know a little bit about defamation law, and technically, an actual accurate report of it could, in theory, throw me into the lawsuit. Now, I live in Texas, and that gives me an enormous defense in certain ways against defamation suits. Yes, I do have a lawyer for that, which is why I know a lot about that. But no, I was just joking around, but I'm like, we do need to cover the seriousness of it, and I'm actually not going to repeat the allegation because let's explain how this works. This is now actionable. This is possible actionable and something that Nick could find himself actually in court over. Anyone who republishes that or repeats the slander in a public platform could technically then be drawn into the suit. Does that make sense? And this is stuff I learned in 2 different countries. You guys know I got sued and everything in the UK for all of this, which has different laws in the US, and then Texas itself has different laws in a lot of the US where I live now. So I have an idea, because I have talked to a lawyer about defamation suits here, of what that entails, what my options are, who also agreed to represent me at the future times if I'm sued for defamation. And so I've actually had a conference with him. Then I did talk with some lawyers and everything in the UK during all of this. And I chose to go a certain route as far as that goes in the UK of what was my best option is how I chose to handle it. And it was unorthodox, but it worked. I got out of it without paying anything. Didn't cost me a penny, and the other person spent 6 figures. Irregardless of what win they got on paper, I walked out of it without spending a single dime. Nothing. So that's a win as far as I'm concerned. But that being said, the way this stuff works, based upon my conversations with them, you need to be very careful of this because modern laws haven't fully caught up with the internet. If there is some legitimate piece of defamation, right? If there's a legitimate piece of defamation, even if it's a news story, if CNN runs a news story that's defamation and it gets taken to court, everyone who in the public platform repeated it can be held liable. Okay, as long as whatever court they're suing in has jurisdiction and ability to carry that over to where they live, they can be held liable. And so what lawyers do, they loop everyone in. Because if you're already going to spend the money for the lawyer, if you're already going to dish out several $100,000 for these sort of suits, which is what it's going to run you to take it to court, you include everyone. And anyone who doesn't want to get roped into it at that point probably needs to pull, delete, and issue a retraction would usually be the wisest choice. You know, that's usually your wisest choice. So anyone who heard the rumor of the allegation, unless they were convinced it was true, unless you were worried they weren't going to sue, should be concerned. I mean, this is actually one of those things with this whole Kavanaugh situation that could blow up and be really, really ugly. If the guy chooses to dig in deep enough, or someone chooses to fund it, and he chooses to actually press defamation charges against news outlets, that's going to trickle over to hundreds and hundreds of other people, and they're all going to have to do something. Like they could actually be seeing individual fines. You can see individual little fines going down to every single web page that reshared the story and the allegations if he wins a defamation suit over those accusations. You need to understand how that works. It trickles down. Because Nick repeated the allegation, it's not about Nick. He's not taking Nick to court. Nick is going to be tacked on the side because he didn't choose to respond quick enough and get rid of it. You know, he kind of laughed it off and published the thing publicly without realizing it would be different. No one's going to go through the trouble, most likely, to spend $300,000 or $200,000 suing Nick over repeating the story. But if they're suing the original person involved and they start tacking on everyone who has money and outreach who repeated the defamation, they don't need to prove that that person committed defamation. Do you understand how that works? They just need to prove that the original person committed defamation, and then everyone who repeated it is guilty by default. Now, that's not always going to be the case, but that's oftentimes the way the courts are ruling this. So if they just go ahead and just loop everyone in and put them all on the paperwork, then those people, can get their say in court to say, hey, but they've got to defend the original defamation. They're actually not going to be able to say, oh, I didn't mean malice. They're going to have to come in and prove that the original story wasn't defamation. And this gets really tricky. Like, for example, because I didn't even get my time in court. I didn't have the money available to fight that, which means I did not get a court date. The UK is kind of weird on that. Like, for example, with mine, I technically lost that lawsuit. So any of my troll channels who hate me, if they were to re-upload any of the videos in which I was found liable by the British court, the High Court in the UK, for example, if that YouTube personality happens to live within the jurisdiction of the United Kingdom, the High Court could collect on them. In other words, they're guilty of republishing the material. If they re-upload my videos that I don't have up, right? If they were to re-upload those videos like a lot of the people do, guess what? They're now guilty of defamation also, because they republished the material. In the most extreme cases, even sharing it could be an issue. For example, like one of the things that I looked into the possibility of suing for defamation over, but it was going to be too costly and too problematic, some people who hate me republished it on their social media. So technically, a good lawyer would rope them in also. They would go through and find all the YouTube fitness personalities who shared that defamatory material and include them in the lawsuit. Even though they didn't create it, they just shared it. But they shared it publicly as a public figure for a large audience to see. And so they would be responsible for their share of the damages inflicted by resharing the original story. Even though they're not the one who created it. They didn't create the content or the web page. Technically, the way a lot of defamation law, depending on where you live, still works, even resharing a website or a video or whatever on your own page can technically, in some cases, still fall under defamation because you've republished the material. So that's the problem Nick is running into. And yeah, it could get bad, because if Phil is actually really serious about really taking it all the way to trial, what Nick does isn't going to stop it from going to trial. Because if he's going after the main person who made the remarks and who made the allegations and any news outlets that reported them, he's already got a possible strong case. So then what he will be able to do, if he is successful, if the court rules in his favor, he can hit everyone down the road who repeated the fake news. Because repeating as a news story defamation is still defamation. Even if you thought it was legitimate news, you still technically are guilty of defamation because you repeated someone else's defamation even though you thought it was true. That can, in some cases, be a problem. At the very least, you're probably going to have to pull it. You're possibly going to have to issue a retraction if you're lucky and not pay anything. Assuming that court has the ability to get to you. You might be outside of their long reach. You might be outside of their reach, but if you're within their reach, then yeah, you can be held liable just for republishing or repeating the situation. And that's stuff that unfortunately we do have to pay attention to and know about when we're on the internet. It's really a tricky situation, and with different countries involved and different laws involved in different regions with their slander and defamation and libel laws being slightly different, it can be a tricky situation for those of us who have a public voice. And we most of the time we just hope that no one's going to spend the amount of money necessary to win. But you also got to watch it if someone with real money is the one starting it and then you're repeating it, you could find yourself roped into their lawsuit, because sometimes lawyers will see that and realize that's some deep pockets and they may go after the primary person, and then you get hit for repeating it, even though you weren't the one who created it. And it's just a tricky situation. So with the way I'm looking at it, honestly, with the allegation that really is going on, Nick could, in theory, find himself in a bad situation. In theory. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.